Don't wait until the last minute, so please put your hands together for Mike Sherman.
First, thanks for the nice welcome. Appreciate that. And tough act to follow. I'm getting nervous just after seeing you on the stage. So, no, that was great. Honestly, I was motivated. I'm like, what am I going to do tomorrow when I go? But let me just start off. First, it's similar to what you said. The job, it doesn't stick with you. The title, I have a nice fancy title, but really it is the work you do. And that's the way I kind of looked at my career through my life. I was just going to start with one story. Just people always underestimate me. First, I'm in jeans, I got trainers on. Half the time, if I walk in, people will look and they won't recognize me as being a leader at BT. If I'm with my colleagues, they immediately jump to one of my colleagues that are with me. Maybe it's because I also look younger than my colleagues. I am a little younger than my colleagues, but oftentimes I'm judged differently. And the story I remember, because I don't remember the moment, because I was a kid, I was in the second grade, and my mother told me this story of, she got called to the school. I was in an all-white school. My dad was a military officer, and the teacher proceeds to explain to my mother, your son, he's a little disruptive in class, he's not doing his work, he's not going to go anywhere in life. You may want to enroll him in a different school, almost talking about trade-type activities. We were in the South in the U.S. You probably know, if you know the South in the U.S., it's a little bit racist. My mother, being a strong black woman, very elegant woman, Southern woman, but when you attack her child, black woman comes out. And she was very quick to course correct and make sure that I had all the support I would need to succeed. And so that was kind of the start of my life. But both my parents grew up in the segregated South. They grew up in a period when my father, who graduated valedictorian, actually couldn't go to university at the time. They were segregated universities. The black schools did accept him, but my dad was poor. He had no money. So his only choice was to go in the military. He went to university later in life, so he went in his mid-30s. My mother, she went to an all-girls school and really was more so living at home, and so she didn't have a university experience. So I was very fortunate. My parents invested in me. I got every opportunity to get great education and learn, and I went to one of the top schools in the U.S., Duke University. And when I was there, I was learning the university experience for the first time. I didn't have parents who really told me. I didn't have that network of friends who really explained to me what the university experience would be about. So I went there. I had great friends, had great fun. But when it came time to actually starting to look at how do I get into a career, I just assumed that the hard work would take care of itself. Now you go do your job interviews and you get one of the jobs. Well, at the time, I then started asking friends, so what are the big jobs I should be going at? And they threw out the usual names. They said, well, you should look at Goldman Sachs, you should look at McKinsey, BCG, you should look at these places. I was like, great. All right, where are they at the job recruiting boards? Well, if I had known, they don't actually show up to the recruiting events. It's all the behind the scenes, the pre-networking in which you get engaged. And quite honest, I was late to the game. So that wasn't really a possibility for me. So I did go and I interviewed with the companies that did show up, and there were great companies there. But I was fortunate enough to say, well, this isn't really what I want to do. I looked at myself and said, what I really want to do, I was a good programmer and engineer. I said, I actually want to go and do something much more challenging. So I went originally to a small startup, did that for a year where some of the people that I joined spent some time teaching me, how do you actually get a startup going? How does a business grow? And so by 23, I was fortunate enough to where I said, look, I want to do this on my own. And part of it was I was naive. I was 23. I said, look, it can't be that hard to start a business. So I bought a computer, started writing the first software code in my bedroom, and I didn't know about venture capital. No one had taught me that you can go out and raise money with a business plan and get. So all I did was, well, I need to pay the rent. So I started paying it on the credit card. Within 90 days, I had $100,000 of credit card debt at 19% interest. not realizing that was not the right way to start a business. But we were up and running, and the software, I won't bore you with the details, but it helped save logistics costs at a pretty significant amount. And so I remember going into my first deal, we went into Ford Motor Company, and I show up and I said, I've got this software, great software. And they said, well, you got to prove to me it works. So we did a demo, showed them that we could save roughly $200 million. And they said, well, what are you going to charge us for this software? I said, I think it's $100,000. And they said, oh, that's quite expensive, young man. I was like, all right, I'll take the $80,000 you offered. Just so you know, the next license went for $10 million. So just to give you. But to be clear, I didn't know to sell it for $10 million. I hired someone who taught me that. So we were off in races. I raised $100 million in venture capital within 1 year, and then within 2 years, we were publicly traded on the NASDAQ. Long story short, September 11th happened in the U.S., a bad period of time, so we had to buy ourselves back private because the markets collapsed in the U.S. But again, things that I didn't know how to do. I luckily started knowing how to network. I was calling up friends back from university friends. I remember I called up a buddy of mine who was working at Goldman. I said, look, we got to get off the public markets. We got to get off this thing. It's killing us as a business. And he said, well, the only place you can raise money is in the Middle East right now, and there's a company called InvestCorp. And so, again, I think I'm like 25. I'm showing up to InvestCorp saying, I need about $250 million to buy our company off the market. And lo and behold, we got that done. That's fast forwarding through a lot of pain, by the way. I did get like 20 lawsuits in that time period because it's not easy to buy yourself off the market. But we then fast forward, after we get ourselves off the market, I restructure that business. And we then sell it off to Fujitsu. So I have a big transaction off to Fujitsu. And I woke up at the moment and said, well, what do I want to do in life? I was running this business. The interesting thing is I became the chief technology officer of that business. We actually hired in a CEO who couldn't be any different from me. He was a very larger-than-life white man, very rich, and former Naval Academy grad. But this guy knew business. And what was phenomenal about him, at first I was very threatened. I felt, why are they bringing this old man in to run my company? I can run my own company, but the best thing I did was I humbled myself and said, what can this man teach me? And I leaned in, and Jeff Simpson spent a lot of time with me. And he would always sit with me and say, well, yes, young bull, you could go do that, but if we approach it this way, we probably win. And it was those lessons with him late at night, spending time with me. He didn't look at my race, my background. He didn't look at anything. He just looked at me and said, look, this is a young person that I can invest in. And that investment helped me out tremendously through that period. And he did something even greater. When we sold the company, you could see that I had a little bit of stress on me. I was like, well, what do I do next? And he got my board to fund my MBA. So they sent me back to get my MBA. I went back to my undergrad, Duke, to get my MBA. And that's where I said, well, what I really love is I love strategic thinking. And so back to, who are you? What are your strengths? And I said, I'm actually really good at kind of strategy and analytics. And so I said, where's the best place to do that? And people kept pointing back to BCG. They said, BCG founded strategy. You should go there. And so it was one of those aspirational jobs that I said, how do I get into this firm? And, fortunately, got through that process, got to the firm. One of the things when I looked at the firm at the time, there was one black partner. Actually, she wasn't a partner. She was a principal, but she made partner pretty quickly, and that was it around the globe. And for those that don't know BCG, I think BCG now operates in 120 locations around the world, had at that time roughly 1,000 partners. It's close to 1,500 partners now, and there was one black female partner, and that was it. And Nika spent time with me, and she said, look, it's going to be rough. You're going to experience lots of things. You're going to experience passive aggressiveness. You're going to experience microaggressions. You're going to experience macroaggressions. She said, but you can get through it, but you're going to have to let your work speak for itself. And so I hunkered down at BCG. I made partner within roughly 6 years, and became one of the most successful partners in the firm. Actually, when I left, one of the accolades that I had was I was the most successful commercial partner in the firm globally. I had landed, thank you. No. I will say thank you for the shoot, but honestly, what that afforded me, it afforded me to dress like I want, talk like I want, do what I want, because no one's going to give up that money. And by being a partner at BCG, they also had one time, I guess it must have been 7 years ago, I was on the beach with my family. We were in Jamaica. I was loving it, relaxing. And my phone rings, and I look, and it's the CEO from BCG, and I said, well, maybe I should answer. And so I answered, and he said, look, we've got a problem. We don't have enough black people in this business. I mean, he was just that direct. And again, this is a white man from the Northeast, but he and I had relationship throughout the years, but he said, I really need something from you. I need you to help the partners be better with diversity, and specifically black diversity. And at that time, I hadn't really done anything at that level around diversity, around people agenda. That wasn't, I was a telecom person. But I said, look, I'll tackle this problem like I've tackled anything else. I'm going to bring intellectual rigor to this if you want it. And you have to be comfortable with me calling out where the issues are. And we really did put in several programs in BCG, and the firm did thrive having more black intake. But it still struggled with getting black leaders at the top. I think there's 4 black partners out of 1,500 now, so numbers improve, but that is abysmally bad for a firm of that size. And that's no criticism of BCG. I could go to any other top bank, consulting firm, they're all gonna look the same. And then when I moved over here to the UK to join BT, I noticed kind of very similar when I looked across the FTSE. So we're a FTSE 15 company. And you look at the executive committees, you look at the boards of directors, and you just don't see a lot of us in these companies. And at first, again, I came in to do a job. I said, look, I want to do strategy and transformation for the group. I want to hunker down and do my work. But within the first week when I joined BT, I remember walking the halls, and this woman comes up to me, and she grabs me by both hands. And I didn't know what the culture was going to be like. I mean, we're all black, but black Americans aren't black Brits, so I didn't know what it was going to be like. So this black woman comes and she just grabs my hands and she says, "You are critically important." And I was like, and I'm standing there, I'm like, okay. And she's like, no. She's like, we do not have members of our senior leadership team, let alone executive committee, that are black, and we need you to be here, and we need you to be engaged, and we need to see you. And I think within, Simone's here, but within the first month or so, they said, can you come just speak to our black professionals group? And what I realized, because again, we want to do our work, but part of what I feel just giving back is telling my story. Every story is going to be unique. Each of us are different, but helping people believe, because quite honestly, and I'll give you kind of a takeaway. I know I told a long story, but my lessons have been, look, there are more doors open than are closed. There are always going to be people that are going to judge you, that are going to try and, figure out why something is different that you can't achieve. But I don't let any of that stuff get in my head. I don't listen to it. There are always good people out there. So I'll give my couple of takeaways. One is, really take risks early in your career, because as you get older, you will have more responsibilities, but equivalently, you will also get to where I now have speak that would say, oh, you can't go do that startup. How are you going to get money? How are you going to pay the bills? Other things will get into life and get in the way. So take those risks early in your career. I don't regret a moment of running up that credit card, starting that business. I mean, it could have failed miserably, and then I could have had this debt, but I'd have worked through it. Take the risk, have fun with it. Sorry, I got a few notes here. The second thing that I would say is, I mentioned Jeff Simpson, who mentored me earlier, but I can go through my mentors through my careers. And Nika Rimmer, black woman, she's now the one of the top senior executives at a food company called McCormick. She mentored me very closely, and she could keep it real. You know, she always had a keeping it real discussion with me. But she wasn't my only mentor. Jeff Simpson, white man. Raj Vadarajan, Indian man. I could go through the list of people that didn't look like me, didn't speak like me, weren't from the same background as me. And many of those people were willing to help me because I was interested in asking the right questions and getting help. And so I will just say, make sure you seek out mentors, but they don't always have to look like you. It's great if they do, and it's great when they do, but the community is too large of people that can help you get what you want to achieve. And so seek those people out that are passionate about diversity, because they don't always look like us, which is okay. And then I know you mentioned, Carl, you mentioned, what are we good at? And I talk about similar to that, what is your personal brand? What are you known for? And you gotta figure that out, and you gotta manage it, because one of two things will happen. Your brand narrative will be managed for you. Oh, she's rude, she's got an attitude, he doesn't have the intellectual capability to do that. People will make a narrative up around you, and they will talk about it. Or you can say, this is what I want to be known for. And when you demonstrate excellence, you will have the right people who will talk about you in the way that you want to be referred to and help you build that brand. And then that brand can afford you the rights and the opportunities to open up other doors. So I do encourage you to do that. And then last is, don't let, I made it sound like they were all successes. I will tell you, along that journey, there were many, many failures. And don't let the failures limit you, because as a leader, you have to reflect on, well, what things did not work? What did I try? You don't want to fail massively, but you're going to have micro failures throughout your career. That's just the reality. But reflect on what key learnings you take away from those failures. I do want to pause there, because I wanted to open up. I think we have some microphones, hopefully, and if not, we can just shout it out. But I'd love to open it up to a few questions you may have before I have to go. Way in the back over there. Yes. Yep. You with the hand up? I see.
Okay. My first question to you is, how did you get to a point in your career where you were unapologetically you?
Oh, good question. Well, when I had my startup, I was always, it was my company. What are you going to do? When I started BCG, I looked at the culture and I said, look, it's easier to fit in than to be different. So, they had their khaki pants. I got my khaki pants. I got my white and blue crisp shirts like they wore. At BCG, I'd say I didn't do it till I made partner, and I wish I'd done it earlier, because I think people would have accepted a lot more. One thing that, and I'll just say, when I was a partner, I remember this young man from Stanford came in, and he had dreads down to here. He was extremely tall, played basketball, but brilliant. I mean, absolutely mathematically brilliant. And I remember this white partner comes up to me, and they're like, we're not really sure how Jamal will get through the interview process. And I remember that's when I leaned in and said, well, why? And he did get an offer. He didn't take an interest in it, but I would say he lived his true self even through the interview process. There will be barriers put up sometimes when you are, but you got to gauge whether the environment will accept it or not. Yes.
Hi, Michael. I work for BT as well, and I wanted. I spoke to you on the phone and asked you to come to the conference, So I think of myself as quite ambitious, and I wanted to find out, not just in BT, but what are the leaders trying to do to build up more black professionals or just individuals within BT and outside?
Yeah. So first, I got to tell this story. I was in our executive committee meeting, so our guys, our CEO, all of our members. My phone rang, and there wasn't a number on it because she wasn't in my phone. And so I looked at it, and I was like, this could be someone from the board. So I pick up, and she introduces herself and says, I would like to, I hear you're speaking at the conference, can I come? I was like, wow, this was absolutely bold, and I love it. I do, I love it. Brilliant. So to answer your question, one is we're elevating it to another level, and so Simone's here as well, and I know you wrote Simone, but I think what we're doing, every company has to do. So one of the things that the UK, in my opinion, is further behind on the US is just a language around diversity and inclusion. When I first started, even saying the word black inside our executive committee and referring to the problems with it, you could see the discomfort in people talking about it. I said, if we can't have a dialogue about it, we're not going to actually resolve anything. So, first was getting our language right, just so that we could actually have an open dialogue. The second is, I think you have to start with just accountability to numbers. And I say, look, the numbers don't lie. And if we put out, here's what our numbers look like, that's who we are today, we have to test ourselves. Is that who we want to be? I mean, if we say that we're comfortable with it, and then just stand up, own it, and say we're comfortable with it, or we have to say, no, we want to be something different. I think BT is putting in its actions. I mean, our board has changed radically. We now have a woman of color on our board, which is absolutely excellent. We have more women on our board, which is excellent. I think it's not an easy thing to fix, but we have to keep the attention to it. And then we need, quite honestly, you to start to share back. If we solve the inclusion problem, the diversity problem will solve. So we have to just make sure that we're an inclusive place that gives opportunity to everyone and people feel that it's welcome. And I think we're absolutely open to being creative with that. And every company has to be. Sorry. I'm going to move to this side because we've been over here. So, yes, far over there, yes. Yeah.
How do you deal, thank you. How did you deal with the passive aggressiveness at work and the ignorance and all of that stuff?
Yeah, so.
Especially coming to the UK.
So, passive aggressive over here would be I couldn't detect it. It's very different in the UK. I mean, look, in the UK, all jokes aside, I don't think anyone would be passive aggressive with me just because of my positional authority, and that's sad because I'm not going to naturally detect that because I'd like to correct that if it did. But when it's happened. Look, I'll give a story of one regret. When I was at BCG, it was a time when Obama was going for the first election in the US, and there was an Indian guy on my team who was a really good friend. I mean, we hung out all the time. And we were at a dinner with two white colleagues, and he says, look, Obama is not going to win this election because he's too much being an uppity nigger. And I was like, I sat back and I was like, I just went quiet and I couldn't speak. And I sat there and the two white individuals looked at me like, is this okay? So we moved on from the conversation because I went back, I called a black friend of mine and said, I couldn't believe this. This happened and he was positional authority higher than me. So, I'm thinking, and then this is a friend too, so I'm like, if I report this, he's fired. I mean, he'll get fired that day. If I don't say something, I can't deal with myself. And so what I did was I finally said, can we get coffee one morning? So it was like 2 days later. And we grabbed a coffee and I said, look, that word holds so much pain. And he and I actually both had tears coming out of our eyes at the end of this discussion because he didn't realize the pain of that word. He was from India. He said, well, I hear it in the music. You and I listen to the same music. I hear it all the time. I just felt like I used it contextually in the right way. I was like, it was contextually okay, but not for you to say. So, it was kind of a regret that I didn't say something at dinner, because then I kept wondering, well, what did those two white individuals take away from that interaction where I didn't say anything because I didn't respond, and so did they now feel it was okay in a context to use that? So it was a regret of mine that I didn't have that. How am I doing on time? Time up? Okay, can I do one more? All right, one more question. Right.
Hi. Oh. Can we do two questions? I was given a mic.
Oh,
But they should go first.
I can't wait to hear your question. Hi, Mike. Thanks for sharing your story. It seems like you achieved so many things, and you've obviously probably come across many risks. And you spoke about it's good to take risk early in your career. Are there any markers you've identified when it comes to taking risks that helps you decide whether a risk is worth taking or whether you're just having a bad day, leave it? So, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, honestly, I think early in my career, the risk mainly is financial. Like, because other than financial, most of the risk isn't there. It's all in our heads. We start to make up risk. Like, you start to self-doubt, talk against yourself. You wonder, can you do this? You wonder, will others support you? I would say put all that aside. Have a good idea. Have something you want to do. Be passionate about it, and then just go for it. And so the only risk, I think, but it is a real risk, is access to capital and money, I think, in whatever you're trying to achieve, because at some point that can stop you from doing what you actually want to achieve. But even that's you can overcome that.
Thanks, Mike. Just firstly, want to say that I go to a lot of these conferences, and you've delivered one of the best talks I've heard from a black professional. Incredibly open and incredibly inspiring. So round of applause, I think, from everyone as well. I think it's just great. It's great stuff to hear, and great stuff to hear about the journey. So I do actually have a question. And my question is, can you name some of the soft skills that you've nurtured that have contributed to your success today?
Yes. So I'll give a few, but first I'll say, you almost made me blush, but it reminded me. When I came back from vacation, I went to Mallorca, and I got my tan on, and none of my white colleagues would say anything. And finally, luckily, one of the black colleagues comes in, they're like, "Oh, so you got your tan?" I was like, "Thank you. I worked hard for this tan." So anyway, so soft skills. First, I think being black in America, you end up, you don't realize it, but you speak two languages. I have my way of hanging out with my black friends and then with my white friends. And we underutilize that skill in our profession. So we do that, socially, and then come to work, we drop it. And I will tell you, when I got the largest contract in BCG's history, it was roughly a single contract, $150 million per year for 4 years. The largest before that was like 40. So huge magnitude difference. Well, the people were it was with AT&T. It was 3. So when I got into AT&T, networking with everyone, but it was 3 black executives that I became friends with. And when I said, look, I want to know how to navigate, I just kept asking them. And they were quick to say, well, let me tell you, this is how this works. This is what this person needs. And they explained. So that just networking from using the resources back with our community, we can use that in the corporate world to help us. The second thing I found was, networking outside of just my peers. So I didn't particularly like the bar, go out and bar and slam a bunch of drinks and shots, drinking culture, which is a white fraternity type thing in the U.S. But that was what was going on at BCG when I joined, and that was where people were networking all across the spans and so I just said, look, I'm gonna go do it. So I went because I felt this is an opportunity for me to network with people, to learn what they're going to do. So I spent the time with them. I didn't do all the shots. But, that was important to me. I think also getting out to start to mentor people early. And I would mentor people that were different from me. I would pick people that were different, but that bilateral learning from mentoring. So one of the people I most recently mentored, he's now at Harvard Business School. He was a first generation to go to college in his family, black, queer, gender ambiguous man. And he said, look, I'm just uncomfortable in this operating environment and I don't know where to go. And his you seem open. So I leaned in. I said, no, I want to understand. And he taught me way more than I learned. He taught me way more than I potentially taught him. And that relationship, as I've continued to invest in trying to think, how do you really embrace inclusion? He's someone that I still reach out to, and he kind of always looks at me like, you're asking me? I was like, well, look, you're living a life that I don't live, so I need to understand so I can make sure that I principally do the right things. And to me, that learning of making sure, but it's just being open to having those relationships and learning. So I know I've went over on my time. Oh, you get, oh yeah, I do. I get, okay. All right, so I guess we get a few more questions? Okay. Yes. Your hand was up first, so you get the mic. Right here.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
So you've listed quite a few of your achievements, but what is your proudest moment? What are you, it doesn't have to be work-related even, but what was the moment where you sort of shocked yourself and thought, oh, damn, I am good?
You know, I don't know. I mean, they're all lots of little things that I was proud of. I was proud when I got, when my engineering project and university work where we did an early AI. I was proud when my company, when I actually had my software work for a company. I was very proud when the company went public. I was proud when we signed that thing to sell it. I was proud when I got my MBA. I was proud when I made partner at BCG. And I was proud when Gavin Patterson reached out and said, look, you're the guy to run BT's strategy and transformation for the future. I mean, all those things are proud. I guess, what gives me day-to-day pride is watching my sons grow in their achievements. I mean, and probably the most proud, you can bring me to tears, but, so I have twin boys that are 4 years old that have autism. And seeing them have life struggles, but seeing them achieve and then and learn differently, but learn very well. Them going through their therapy where they do have natural struggles and they're learning, that probably brings me the greatest pride is just watching them through their journey. So again, don't bring me to tears, you're gonna get me started.
Hi, so my name's Chinedu. I work at Beamer Global Asset Management, investment arm of Bank of Montreal. Thank you so much for everything you shared. Just got a question. You mentioned you've got a family, obviously you've got kids you're raising, and obviously no doubt very challenging at the same time. How do you, because I've got a wife and a son, I was wondering how do you balance, or rather deal with work-life integration at the same time as achieving everything you've achieved so far and continuing to achieve?
Yeah, work-life balance is always a problem. And I'm not really sure this have-it-all notion isn't there. And so, we've had to sacrifice a lot. I mean, I've sacrificed vacations that have been completely blown up. My vacation in Mallorca, while I was joking, a week before I was going on to Mallorca, new prime minister comes out and says we need a full fiber plan for the UK and we need it in a few weeks. That changed everything, so I had to blow up my vacation plans. I did still get to Mallorca, but not as long as I would have liked. But these things, you're going to have to make hard trade-offs. I've probably erred many times on, look, the job, when it needs to be done, needs to be done well, it needs to be done thoroughly. But, oftentimes I will say the job will also flex when you need it to. And you've got to know the employer. So I've had employers who've been very good when I've had problems. When my father was passing away, BCG basically said that you had to always be on a project or a program. And they said, look, they gave me an internal shadow code, said all your time can go to this, deal with your dad. And I was like, well, so what work am I gonna do? And they were like, we don't care, don't do any work. I'd say people understand when you need the time, but don't abuse it has probably been my big thing. Okay, thank you.